Brian, thank you for joining us. For those of you that are on, I think we'll go ahead and kick it off and turn it over to Brian to talk about Coughdrop. Again, if you have questions, just throw it in the chat, and Brian, I'll get those questions over to you.
Perfect. Appreciate it. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes, we've got you. Yep.
Awesome. Great. Well, let's get this party going then.
Thank you.
So thanks everybody for coming. Appreciate your attendance and participation. If you have questions, definitely feel free to shoot them out there. But I'm going to take a little bit of time. I'll introduce myself, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about Coughdrop and what it is that we've tried to do with our app. Coughdrop it's not a brand new type of product. AAC, which stands for Augmentative and Alternative Communication, is something that's been around for a long while actually, more than people realize. And what we've tried to do is say, how can we raise the bar in accessible communication, and how can we support communicators in valuable and in new ways? So a little bit about me. My name is Brian Whitmer. I am a computer science major by trade, actually. My graduate research was in human-computer interaction, which is the science and art, really, of how people and technology interface. So out of school, I started a company called Instructure, and we made Canvas, which is a learning platform that's used around the country and around the world by schools and school districts and lots of different users. There's over 20 million users of Canvas now, so the company got really big. And as it was getting big, I realized that I wasn't making the difference that I wanted to in the way that I wanted to. So I started looking where I could go to something a little more smaller and be able to have a little bit more strategic focus. And about the same time that was happening, my oldest daughter was diagnosed with we knew she had a disability, but didn't know what it was. And she finally got a diagnosis for a disability of Rett syndrome. If you're not familiar with Rett syndrome, a lot of people compare it to Parkinson's and cerebral palsy with maybe, yeah, those two probably mixed together is a good description. She's in a wheelchair. She doesn't have very good use of her hands. She can't speak. She has a feeding tube, but she can still communicate, and she actually communicates really well using her eyes. So we've always known that technology was going to be an important part of her communication strategy. And once we started to really dig in with her and figure out what we could do for her, I started looking at this whole realm of augmentative and alternative communication. You have apps and you have devices and you have tools that are out there. And I said, these are all great. What can we do to sort of raise the bar? Because as I started working with them and started using them, it was great that they existed. But because of my usability bent, I looked at them and I said, these are hard. It's hard to use. I tried to build just a little grid of buttons for my daughter to use, and it was like, that was a lot of work. It took me an hour to put together like 12 buttons. So that was crazy and unnecessary. And so I started reaching out to experts in the field. I started talking to speech therapists and occupational therapists and school district assistive technologists, and just, saying, tell me about this space. Tell me about AAC. What have you used and what do you like? Have you tried Proloquo or Touch Chat, or have you talked to the Toby people? What are your experiences? What do you wish was different or better? And how can we change that? How can we raise the bar for technology in this space? And as we started talking, we were coming up with ideas, and we'd bat the ideas around across others. We talked to communicators in the space, try things out on my guinea pig of a daughter who was very willing to help us out. And through all of that experimentation and diving into the research and talking about where things needed to go, we ended up building what has become the Coughdrop app. So now there is an app out there called Coughdrop. If you're wondering about the name, so when someone has been talking too long and their voice starts to go hoarse, they put a cough drop in their mouth so people can hear them better. So augmentative and alternative communication, this technology sector that we're talking about, is a cough drop for people with special needs. It makes it so their voice can be heard. It doesn't create a voice for them, doesn't give them a voice. A lot of these individuals already have a communication strategy and are already able to express some thoughts and wants and desires, but we want to be able to make that easier for them and more understandable. And we also want to enable the team around those communicators as they try to grow. So that's a little bit about Coughdrop. For a while, and it can be a bit intimidating. There's a lot of research and best practices that have been built in, and you can see there's a lot of different options. You can get an iPad, you can get a Windows computer, you can get what's called a dedicated device, which is funded by insurance. All these things are options, and it's hard to know what to do. And you can talk to a speech therapist about it. This is for some of them, this is right in their wheelhouse, but for others, they've never really done it before, and they're kind of making it up as they go too. So there's a lot of things that are intimidating about it. What we're talking about is trying to supplement someone's communication strategy. When you have a communicator who is nonverbal or partially verbal, we want to give them an environment where they can feel comfortable and they can feel stable. It used to be that people would say, I don't want to give my child AAC, I don't want to give them a computer to talk, because then they'll stop talking with their mouth. And what the research has shown consistently is that that's not the case. Having technology like this to support communicators, you can think of it more like a walker. When someone needs a walker to be able to support them and have something to lean on as they go, then it helps them. It gives them a more comfortable environment in which they can strengthen those muscles and get back to where they need to. But as soon as they're comfortable, they're going to ditch the walker, because people don't really like walking with a walker if they don't have to. And AAC is very much the same way. It gives us a fallback that we can use when we're feeling too stressed or too uncomfortable, or when the situation is just really difficult. And so it's more of a supplement than a replacement. For some communicators, they're going to use it as their main communication strategy, but they'll also be reacting with smiles and hand gestures and facial expressions. All of those are components of communication. And to say that a device is the only way somebody's going to communicate is almost never accurate. So while it can be intimidating to know where to start and how to jump in, there's lots of great technology out there. There's a lot of value that this technology can provide for the communicators that are leveraging it. There are lots of great systems, and one of the nice things about Coughdrop is that it can run on many different systems. You can put it on an Android tablet or on a Kindle Fire. You can put it on an iPad or an iPhone. You can put it on a Windows computer. And all of those systems, Coughdrop can support those systems. So you can put it where you need to in order to support your communicator. Whatever you've got, you can throw it on a Chromebook. What's nice about that, Coughdrop's actually cloud-based, so it'll run on as many systems as you need it to, and they'll all stay synchronized automatically. So if you have an iPad that the school is offering, and they've said, yeah, we can use this iPad at school, but we can't send it home, you can log in on Coughdrop on the iPad at school, and then log in on a cheaper tablet. You could buy a $50 Android tablet to use at home, and then the communicator can use them both, and they'll stay updated automatically. Coughdrop works with the cloud, but it doesn't need the cloud all the time. So it works without an internet connection. Basically, it downloads everything it needs to the device, and everything runs offline, but then it checks for updates whenever it notices that there's a connection. So there are lots of great opportunities to use AAC. And Coughdrop, we've tried to say, you should be able to use this wherever you're at and whatever system you're on. And to build a solution that can support people wherever they are, rather than saying you need to come with this specific solution in mind. When we talk about implementing AAC, a lot of people, if you go to a person off the street and say, I have this disabled person, I want to be able to communicate, we can make buttons that will speak for them. What buttons should we make to speak for them? And people will think of things like, I need to go to the bathroom, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I'm bored. These are the kind of phrases and concepts that people will just off the cuff think of. And that's kind of how AAC started, if you look at the history of the space. But what they found very quickly is that what we need more than those needs-based communication is we need generic vocabulary that we can use in lots of different settings and in lots of different environments. So this is actually called core vocabulary. We try to find words that we can use in more than one way so we can leverage them lots of different times. So words like need and like and go and there. Those are words that by themselves, they don't necessarily tell us a whole lot. They can actually communicate quite a bit. For a beginning communicator, we can say go, and that lets us know sort of the intent of the individual has. We can figure out how to fill in the gaps for them. But then they can use that to say go there and go home and go away. And they can start to use these words in more than one setting and use them for a variety of communication that they would never be able to get if we were pre-programming phrases for them. So you can think about this, which is exactly what we've been talking about. You can build a vocabulary that is very basic. But what we recommend for people to do when they talk about communication, based on research and based on what's happened lately in the industry, is to say, let's create a vocabulary set that's going to have lots of words. And if that's too overwhelming, a lot of times when we show people a layer of buttons that has lots of buttons on it, they say, whoa, that's too much. That's very overwhelming, and I can't understand that. We say, well, that's fine. Let's go ahead and hide some of them so that we only have the phrases we need. If you look at these buttons that are available right here, there's an enormous number of things that you can say using just these buttons that are available right now. And it's a variety of things, which is the greater value. But what happens is when we talk about, let's say, for example, with touch typing, when you learn to type on a computer or learning to play the piano, you start to learn where the notes are or where the keys are on the keyboard without having to look at them and without having to think about them. And what we want is for our communicators to have that same kind of motor memory or motor planning, as we call it, with their vocabulary. So we want the buttons to always stay in the same place so that when we add more buttons in and when we start to expand the vocabulary, we don't mess them up. Because a lot of communicators are going to have motor disorders as well. In order for them to be able to hit the buttons, they have to think about it and say, okay, first I'm going to lift my hand, and then I'm going to move it up to here, and then I'm going to get this finger and I'm going to push it down so I can touch, and then I'm going to release. And that may all sound super easy to a non-disabled individual, but for a lot of the individuals that we work with in the AAC space, these are things that they have to attend to and focus on. And so the more we can make it automatic, and the less they have to think about that process, the more successful they're going to be with communication. So we make sure the buttons always stay in the same place, which is why we hide all these empty spots. Because then when we start to add more words in over time, we haven't moved anything around. All the buttons are going to stay in the exact same spots where we put them, but we can just expand the vocabulary in place, which is much more effective than what we saw before, where if we start with 6 buttons and then we say, okay, now to add some more. So we'll shrink these and move them to the corner, and then we'll add some more down below or whatever it may be. That's less effective because it's going to ruin our motor plan. So someone asked if that means that Coughdrop follows the LAMP therapy process. LAMP is a strategy that AAC communicators will use. It's called language acquisition through motor planning, which has a heavy emphasis on this idea of motor planning, the idea that we're going to keep vocabulary in the same place. Coughdrop has a bunch of different boards that are built into it, and the ones that we recommend by default encourage this sort of motor plan strategy, where it's always the same sequence. So I always know where I is going to be, or if I've got folders, because in AAC, you can imagine if you want to have more than the words that are available on one page, you add folders, and then it goes deeper and deeper. So if I have folders, then I want that process to always be the same place. So I hit here, then here, then here, and that's how I say broccoli. And every time I want to say broccoli, it's exactly the same process. So we try to have that consistency, but it's not required. And we have vocabulary sets that don't leverage that. So it's kind of up to you how you want to build it. With Coughdrop, we don't impose a lot of restrictions on the communicator and on the communication process. We say, let's figure out what works well for each communicator, and let's do that. And let's make sure we have an app that can support them. And if we need to change it up, then we just turn off a setting or we just tweak things, and then we can do what works for the individual instead of focusing so heavily on the process and saying, let's make sure people can follow this process. We say, let's focus on the individual and let's make sure the individual can succeed. And if we pick and choose from different processes and different strategies, that's great, because if it's working for the communicator and the individual and it's going to give them the opportunity for growth, that's what we really need. There's a term in the augmentative communication space called presumed competence. It's actually gotten a little bit argued, or it's become sort of a loaded term lately. People prefer the term presumed potential now. But the idea here is that the communicators that we work with, people that are going to use AAC, they kind of get a bum rap, quite frankly. If you worked with individuals with disabilities, and you haven't heard someone talk to them like a baby, then you haven't been working the disability space long enough. Or if you haven't heard somebody been talked down to or even been talked about rather than talking directly to them. This is something that happens very regularly. Or maybe you're just in that magical, super awesome place where nobody does that. But I haven't seen it. So it's definitely not here in Utah. So anyway, presuming potential is the idea that we're going to believe in these communicators, and we're going to assume that they can make progress. And part of that is teaching them to make progress. So when you give someone something like a communication system, like a Coughdrop, some of the things you're going to keep in mind is when they first start hitting buttons, they may not be deliberate. Chances are they're going to hit some things on accident. But what we're going to do as we support them is we're going to honor those expressions. We're going to teach intentionality by assuming intentionality. And so as they hit those buttons, we're going to respond as if they said them on purpose. Because even if they didn't say them on purpose the first time, they will learn that we are going to respect this as a form of communication. A lot of individuals with special needs, especially those who are nonverbal, are not used to controlling their environment. And they're not used to being able to have people's attention. When my daughter first got a communication system, it was an eye gaze system, and the only communication she had ever had before that was when we would go up to her and say, hey, do you want this? Do you want this? Or, hey, are you feeling this way or this way? Do you want to lay down or do you want to sit up? It was always us initiating the interaction. And so I think she had a little bit of mistrust that we would actually pay attention to her. And so there was a button on her communication system that said, I'm mad at you. And she would preface everything she said with, I'm mad at you, because she noticed that whenever she would say that, we would immediately pay attention. She'd say, I'm mad at you, and say, oh my goodness, you're mad at us, what's wrong? And then she would say, I'm silly, or watch a show, or whatever it was. And so that became sort of her beginning mechanism to make sure we were paying attention, because she was so not used to being able to control the interaction and initiate the interaction that way. So we need to make sure that we are honoring those communications, because it will give communicators the confidence to continue expressing themselves and continue reaching out. So we presume potential, and through doing that, we're going to support communicators in developing into the kind of communicators that we want to be. Another concept, this is not unique to Coughdrop. I'll show you a little bit more about Coughdrop here in a minute, but we need to make sure that we're modeling with communicators. We want our communicators to be fluent in the communication system, but the only way to do that is to show them that it is a communication system. And that might hit all the buttons that we say. Just like when we communicate with a beginning verbal communicator, we use words that we don't expect them to understand, but we emphasize and we model the ones that we're using. So when a baby points to the counter and we say, oh, do you want a cookie? Right? And we emphasize want and cookie. And we can do the same thing when we model. When we have a communicator at the beginning, we can hit buttons and we say, do you want to go outside? And so we can start to hit the buttons that will show them ways that they can communicate. So the next time around, they can initiate that by themselves. We need to make sure that we're not afraid to continue working with communicators and stretching and straining. Not trying is probably worse than messing up. I talk a lot about making sure that we just do something. And if you don't have a speech pathologist to work with, but you're talking about implementing communication system or supporting a communicator, just do something. Grab Coughdrop. Coughdrop offers 2 months for free, and that includes the whole communication system. So you can grab the app, you can grab the system, log in and try some stuff. And if it's working, great, then that's awesome. And if you need to tweak it, if you're going to see a speech pathologist a month from now, then when you go meet with them, chances are, the speech pathologists I've talked to agree with me, and they've said, yes, we feel the same way. That's great. And then we can go from there. And if we need to change direction and move to something else, then we can totally do that. And we will figure it out as we go. But starting with something is better than being afraid that we're going to mess everything up. So don't be afraid to get started and keep trying some things, because there's just a lot of value that we can bring to communicators. So now I'm going to jump into the actual app and just a couple of things you can look at that we offer as well. If you have questions, feel free to post them, like I said, in the chat. I'll keep an eye there as I keep going and show you just a little bit about the Coughdrop app. Hopefully you can all still see my screen now that I jumped out of PowerPoint. So when you go to the website, Oh, thank you. When you go to the website, coughdrop.com, then it'll let you sign up. And like I said before, we do 2 months for free. So every communicator, every person that signs up gets a 2-month free trial. And that's a fully featured trial. After that, it's $200 to buy the app for life, or you can pay $6 a month for as long as you want to use it. And we have people, for example, outpatient users that'll use it for a couple months while they're just getting back on their feet, and then they drop it, and they've saved themselves a ton of money using Coughdrop rather than having to buy a whole system up front. But if you're going to use it long term, then the upfront price is definitely cheaper. So anyway, you sign up, you create a login, and then you can install the app is available in the app stores on all the different devices for free. You can download it for Windows too. And when you do that, you download the free app, and then you need a login to get into it. So once you've created that login on coughdrop.com, then you can log into the app. And this is similar to what you'll see. So it'll take you through a little setup wizard, and it'll teach you a little bit about Coughdrop. You can answer some questions and kind of get started. It'll ask what kind of pictures you want to use. You notice the pictures that we showed in the screenshots and things were. It's a vocabulary set called open symbols. But you can also use board maker symbols if you're familiar with board maker, or lesson picks if you have a lesson pick subscription. So you can kind of pick those settings and get started with the app. Then once you've done that, then the app will start to jump into this, which if you've used augmentative communication before, if you use a dynamic AAC system, this will look familiar. And the idea is that you can hit buttons.
I want to talk
to
you.
So you can hit buttons, and you see they're building up here in the sentence box in the top. And I can hit the sentence box.
I want to talk to you
at any time to speak the whole sentence. Any of the buttons in Coughdrop that have this little corner on them, those are folders, and they're going to take you to a different level. So that's how you can get to some of the additional vocabulary that wouldn't be available from the front screen. One of the nice things about Coughdrop, we provide a lot of flexibility. So you can change any of the settings. You can change how big the buttons are, what the spacing is. You can change how long you have to hit the buttons. You can use a button, like a switch, to activate and select rather than having to touch the screen if touching the screen is not going to work. You can also use eye gaze like my daughter. You can use a video game joystick to access the vocabulary, whatever works best for the communicator. We have lots of flexibility and configuration in the app so that you can do what works well for each of the people that you work with. We also have a lot of additional features. So as people start to develop and grow, there are things that can come that can support them in that process. For example, when you've created a sentence in Coughdrop, you can hit this little drop-down menu and see a whole bunch of other options. So you can hit repairs. So if you have a sentence that they crafted and you say, oh, we got a couple things in the wrong order, let's just move them around real quick. Or if you want to repeat it, say it louder or quieter. If you want to flip the text so that it shows upside down, when you're communicating on a flat table, then the person across from you can now see what it is that you're trying to say. Or you can also share it with people. So you can set up contacts in Coughdrop, which can be a cell phone number or an email address. And then when you share messages with those people, it'll send the message directly to them. And the way it does that, it actually sends them a link that they can use to reply. So you can get two-way communication inside of Coughdrop, and they all don't have to use the app. I don't have any right now, but if I did, they would show up here in this alert section, and then I could see who it was that had messaged me recently, and I could reply back to those messages. So I can have a two-way dialogue with someone using text messaging or email, with me using Coughdrop and them using just their text messaging app. So that provides a lot of flexibility for the communicator and helps them to be more part of the digital communication that happens all around us. So there's a lot of great features that are available inside of the Coughdrop app. In addition to just some of these communication tools, when you're working with a communicator, you can, if you turn on the logging component of Coughdrop, then you can pull up and see reports, and you can see what's working and what's not working for each of the communicators that you work with. So you can look and you can see some basic stats on what their usage is looking like right now. You can see how much they're using it each day, how many words they're hitting, how many times people are actually modeling for the communicator. So you can see what people are doing to support the communicator and make sure that we're doing the teaching that we need to. You can pull up and see what words are being used most often by this communicator. My daughter's really been on a happy kick lately. She's really wanted us to know how happy she is in a lot of different times, in a lot of different ways. And it's been really fun to talk to her about that. You can see a breakdown of what parts of speech the communicator is using, what time of day the app is being used. So if nothing's happening on the weekends, or if after the second half of school is a bust, you'll see that really clearly, and you know who to talk to say, hey, let's work on this and let's make it better. You can also see where on the screen they're hitting. So if they're not reaching the bottom for some reason, my daughter has a harder time getting to the bottom of the screen with her eye tracker. That's really obvious, and we can use that information to make informed choices about where to put her vocabulary to best support her. You can also program in custom goals. So you can set and say, you know, we're going to work on these specific words, and Coughdrop will automatically track that. And you can even set up badges that the communicator can work towards. And as they make progress towards those goals, they can see a little progress bar and see that what they're working on, and remind themselves what it is. So you say, for example, we're going to work on WH. We're going to work on questions, right? And we want to be asking lots of questions of the people around us. So you program those in and set a little progress. Say we want to ask at least 3 questions a week for 6 weeks. And then the little progress bar will show up and remind them what it is. And then they can remember throughout the day, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be asking questions. Let me work on that. Let me try to get some questions. And it can be something that they can be more involved in rather than just something that gets imposed upon them. Looks like there's a question here. Email question, what shows up? All the extras after the signature block? That's hard for us. So when you send a message to somebody, either as a text message or as an email, then what happens is they actually get a link, and they hit this link, and it will, I'll just show you. Everybody, don't look at all my secret text messages, okay? Let's see.
Brian, this is really cool. Looks like we actually have another question that came in that I'll get as soon as you show us this part.
Okay, great. So my daughter, for example, she texted me a message. This was me actually just testing some stuff. But then I get a text box right here, and I can write a reply. You know, so I can write whatever it is I want, and that way I won't get all the, like you said, the extra junk that comes when you just respond to an email. So they click the link and hit reply, and then they'll get that message back directly. All right, what was the other question you said, Dustin? Oh, are you muted?
Oh yeah, sorry about that. Okay. How does the logging function differentiate between the communicator and the partner who is modeling?
Great, that's a great question. So there's a couple different ways you can do that. Since Coughdrop is free to you can put on as many devices as you want. You can log in on your own device, so you don't have to use the communicator's device. So they can have theirs in front of them, and you can have yours in front of you. And when you do that, you say, I'm going to go and come in here, and I'm going to model for the person that I'm working with. Now you see this little finger icon that shows up right here. That shows me I'm in modeling mode. So any button hits I select are also going to have that finger, and they're going to show me, oh yeah, I'm modeling right now. So that's great if you have multiple devices, like, you know, and there's actually a lot of value in providing multiple devices and doing a two-way interaction using the same vocabulary. If that's not what you've got, then you can still get to modeling mode. You triple tap or triple click on the clear button, and then that same finger icon shows up. So then you've got access to that when you're working with the communicator on their individual device. So either way, there's actually a third way too. You can, I don't know if I'll be able to do it, let's see. So if you click on the clear and then lift your finger on the home button, so you click down and then drag all the way across and lift, that'll get the same thing as well. So use the one that works best for you, but there's lots of different ways to toggle between modeling and communication mode. So I think we're about at our 30-minute mark. I'm happy to answer any questions if people have more questions. There's lots of great videos on our YouTube channel. And if you're using the app, you can always hit this little question mark button and pop up to ask us a question directly. This is where you'll find links to our support walkthroughs and YouTube videos, but you can also just post a message and we'll get back to you and help you figure out what it is that you need. So like I said, go to coughdrop.com. We do a free 2-month trial for anyone to sign up and try it out. And we're happy to help and support people however we need to.
Oh, great. Thank you, Brian. That was amazing. I remember seeing this now when the demo that we did down there at ATIA, getting some good comments coming in too. Love this solution. Thank you. Very refreshing. Thank you. So great comments. Loved it. One question can you change the output language or output voice? Can the person kind of customize that?
Yeah, so when you're in the free trial, you'll get whatever voices are on the device. So like you'll get the Siri voice or the Google voice. But once you've purchased the app, then we provide, there's a whole library of voices. It's called Acapella is the company that does them. So there's some children and teenager voices and different adult voices. There's like a Southern accent voice. So you can kind of pick and choose something that'll work for you and have a little more variety too.
Great. Awesome. Good stuff, man. Appreciate you jumping on and doing this.
Yeah, I was happy to. That was fun.
Yeah. Yeah. So last chance for those of you that are on. Any questions, throw them in there. I'll thank Brian, and if something pops up, we'll get it in. Otherwise, thank you all for joining us. Brian, thank you very much. Looks like we might have a question. My son is 21, an AAC user, and I'm an AT specialist. I'm not sure if that's a question.
I think she's just saying she's working on the question.
Got it.
Okay, yeah. So in Coughdrop, she says, how do you do a speech prepared ahead of time? So in Coughdrop, if you craft something that took you a little while, then we have this phrases section. So you can come in here and you can save the phrases that you've crafted. So you can put them together and save them, and then you'll have quick access to them. I only have quick and journal. Those are the categories I've put together. But if you want to do more categories, you can definitely do that. And then you hit any one of them.
Give me a minute to reply.
To speak it. But then you also, the quick ones you'll have access to right here in the quick access section. So that way you can put together whatever you need to in advance. What's nice is with Coughdrop, a lot of times if we work really hard on a sentence or a vocalization, we want to be able to activate it, but sometimes that top sentence box isn't quite enough. And so we can actually say, I'm going to use this button, which is now a giant target that the communicator can use, so we can help them have a quick way to launch that, whatever phrase it is that they put together right there without having to necessarily worry about getting to that top sentence box.
Very cool. Thank you, Patricia. Thanks for the question. And actually, looking here, it looks like somebody might have used the Q&A. Nope. Okay. Well, I did share a link to your website in the chat. So for those of you that are in, I'll throw it back in there again right now, actually. So there is a link to the Coughdrop website. And Brian did say that you can go get this in any app store, in Google Play or the iTunes app store. So go check it out. 2 months for free. That's awesome. Brian, thank you. Thank you all for being on the Tech Huddle today.